2 years after my split from Emma, she finally got what she wanted and ended up with her unforgettable first love. She shot me a text, telling me not to crash her wedding and mess things up. Little does she know, I'm already gone. The young girl who grabbed my phone had some choice words for her. With a somber expression, Emma asked the girl who she was to me. On the night before Emma's wedding, everyone threw a pre-party for her and David. Congrats to you both. After all these years, you finally found your happy ending. You guys are the perfect couple. Emma, your ex couldn't even compare to David's little toe. Good thing you ditched him. The ex they were talking about was me. About 6 months after we split, I died. Since then, my soul's been wandering around. Not too long ago, I drifted over to Emma's side and felt like I was stuck with her, unable to move on. Maybe it's 'cause I'm dead. Those harsh words that used to hurt now just sound like noise. Emma kept her eyes down, emotions all over the place. With her delicate, jade-like hands, she peeled an orange for David, carefully removing all the white pith. It surprised me. Emma was always the pampered daughter from a rich family. During our 5 or 6 years of marriage, she never did anything like that for me. Well, there was this one time. I had a high fever, and when I woke up, I craved an apple. She peeled one for me. It was the first time she responded to my feelings. I was touched, thinking I'd finally see some light. But halfway through peeling the apple, David called, saying he was back in the country and needed Emma to pick him up. Emma rushed out. In the end, I never got to eat the apple she peeled. David always loved being the center of attention. When he heard Emma's friends talking about me, he got annoyed. Why bring me up on such a happy day? David, try the orange I peeled for you. Emma gently fed him the orange, and only then did David crack a small smile. But my presence still bothered David. On the way back, David worriedly said, Emma, we're getting married in a few days. Do you think Noah will try to stir things up? It's the most important day of my life, and I don't want it messed up by Noah. Emma leaned on David's shoulder, her tone sharp. Don't worry, he's long done with it. I was speechless. Clearly she was in the wrong, yet her tone showed resentment towards me. David, I hope so. How ironic. David knew how crucial a wedding day was for a couple. And yet it was he who messed up mine. The day I married Emma, David called her. His tone was desperate as he pleaded, Emma, I've been in a car accident. I think I'm dying. Could you come see me? In the video, David's head was covered in blood, looking totally shocking. Emma comforted David while saying to me, I'm going out for a bit. I reminded her, Emma, today is our wedding day. Emma's beautiful brows furrowed even tighter. Noah, be reasonable. David is dying. If I stay by his side, he can go into surgery peacefully. Once she left, all the guests looked at me like I was a joke. Emma's friends straight up mocked me. Noah, see that? You aren't even fit to carry David's shoes. If David weren't abroad, you wouldn't have had a chance to marry Emma. Don't think that just because you married Emma, you're our brother-in-law. To us, only David is our brother-in-law. After the wedding, I got a text from an unknown number. I thought Emma loved you more, but apparently not. Though I had no proof, I knew David had sent that message. It was the first time I realized how powerful an unforgettable first love could be. Before we got married, I only knew about David from Emma's friends. My encounter with Emma started with a typical damsel in distress scenario. I fell for her at first sight and pursued her passionately. At that time, Emma was under family pressure to get married, and I was a suitable candidate. So she married me. Emma's friends didn't like me. They always hinted that if David hadn't gone abroad, I never would have had a shot at marrying Emma. David grew up with them, and they all saw him as Emma's true partner. But back then, Emma told me it was all in the past and that I was the only one in her heart now. I believed her, thinking it was truly over. The truth was, David never had a car accident on our wedding day. That day, David lost a game of truth or dare with his friends, which led to that call. Because of this, Emma got really angry at David and they cut off contact. A while later, David married a girl from a well-matched family through an introduction from his own family. My world returned to peace. Later, David got divorced and came back to the country. With his return, my marriage with Emma began to crumble. Before I knew it, I found myself following Emma and David to their new home. I felt awkward. I never liked invading other people's privacy. In the middle of the night, the wedding planner was still hustling on their wedding preparations. I overheard some details about the wedding. The flowers were flown in from overseas by private jet, ensuring they arrived fresh. Still with morning dew, the suits and wedding dress were custom-made by an Italian haute couture designer, ordered a year in advance. Even the wedding location was meticulously chosen. The wedding planner went over every detail with Emma. Watching Emma's serious expression, I couldn't help but think of my own wedding. It was put together in a hurry, almost ridiculous. Emma had never been involved in the specifics of our wedding. The day before, she was still out of town on a business trip. Whenever I asked for her input, she always said, "Whatever you decide is fine." I thought it was because she trusted me, but now I see she just didn't care. The difference between love and indifference was starkly clear. The two of them went to sleep. David kissed Emma passionately. I closed my eyes, refusing to watch the scene unfold. Surprisingly, what I expected didn't happen. It seemed Emma pushed David away. David's tone was resentful. "Emma, it's been a year, and you still haven't let me touch you. Is it 'cause I was married before? Or do you still have feelings for Noah?" Emma sat up against the headboard, her eyes downcast, lost in thought. In the silence, her face looked exceptionally cold. After a long pause, she finally said, "Don't overthink it. You're the one I love most. I want our first time to be on our wedding night." Her words made David overjoyed. He held Emma's slender shoulders. "Emma, I'm still worried, thinking Noah will cause trouble at the wedding. Why don't you talk to him? He always listens to you." Emma's brows furrowed slightly, showing her displeasure. Just when I thought she was going to refuse, she agreed. With warm fingers, she quickly typed a series of cold words on her phone. "Noah, don't show up at my wedding. You know David doesn't want to see you. You've always listened, right?" David leaned over. Did he reply? "Of course not. I've been dead for 2 years." Unexpectedly, my phone rang. "Stop sending messages and disturbing Noah's peace." It was a young girl's voice. Emma was silent for a few seconds. Her usually calm face suddenly turned dark. "Who are you?" "I'm your mother." The girl hung up after that. I was stunned too. "Who was she, and how did she have my phone?" Emma called back, but the other side had already blocked her. David, being close to Emma, naturally heard the conversation. Even though I had divorced Emma 2 years ago, he still didn't miss a chance to stir things up. "Didn't Noah say he only loved you, and now there's another woman? Maybe the reason he insisted on divorcing you back then was because of her." Emma's expression was indifferent. "Let's sleep, but I'm still worried he'll cause trouble. Noah has never been the generous type. I'll go find him myself tomorrow." Only then did a smile appear on David's face, and he kissed Emma on the cheek. "Emma, you're the best." The next day, Emma found my place. The door was opened by a young, beautiful girl with long black hair and a determined look in her eyes. After I died, my consciousness got all muddled. There are so many things I can't remember. So I had no clue about this girl. When the young girl saw Emma, her demeanor suddenly got sharp. She laughed, her voice dripping with mockery. "Emma, you're really something. Aren't you getting married in a couple of days? And here you are, visiting your ex-husband. Still can't let go of Noah, can you?" Emma didn't even glance at her face cold as she pushed past and walked inside. It was like she was there to catch someone in the act. At first glance, she saw a photo on the cabinet of me and the young girl. She picked it up, her brow furrowing even more. "What's your relationship with Noah? Why are you in his house? Take a guess." The young girl leaned lazily against the doorframe, her tone ambiguous. Emma sneered. "So he really is a liar. I get why she said that. When we got married, I promised Emma I'd love her and only her for the rest of my life, and nothing but death would separate us. But later, I was the one who asked for a divorce. Judging by the current situation, it seems that after our split, I fell for another girl. It's clear I broke the vows I once made. But what right did Emma have to say that about me? When I had a high fever, she left me to pick up David from the airport. When we were on vacation, she bailed halfway to celebrate David's birthday. She skipped our wedding anniversary to take David to a doctor's appointment for his foot injury. Whenever I needed Emma, she was never there. Whenever David needed her, no matter how busy she was, she'd drop everything to be by his side. It was like David was her real husband. I argued and fought with Emma over this. Emma always had all sorts of reasons to justify her actions. She said that when I had a fever, there were doctors to take care of me in the hospital, so it didn't matter if she wasn't there. But David hadn't been back to the country in years, and everything had changed so much. He was unfamiliar with everything, and as a good friend, she had to go pick him up. As for leaving halfway through the vacation, she had promised David long ago that she'd celebrate his birthday with him. All their friends were waiting, and she couldn't break her promise. And missing our wedding anniversary, it was just one anniversary. We could make up for it later. I was being too selfish, she said. David was injured and struggling with daily life. While I only thought about our anniversary, she found it laughable. Why couldn't she make up for David's birthday? I had been looking forward to that vacation for 3 months, planning for a month. But in the end, the most important person was missing, rushing off to celebrate David's birthday. When Emma said those things, her brow was always furrowed, her eyes full of impatience. And standing next to her, David would calmly apologize to me, saying he wouldn't trouble Emma anymore. Then Emma would comfort David in a gentle tone, completely different from how she spoke to me, telling him it wasn't his fault and not to take it to heart. David would nod slightly, his eyes full of triumph and provocation as he glanced at me. I was the one who was wronged. Yet, in the end, I was made out to be the unreasonable one. Emma always stood by David, unconditionally. As time went on, I grew tired of arguing with her. I also realized that Emma wasn't worth my love at all. So, I brought up divorce. At that time, she looked at me deeply. "Noah, are you sure about this?" I nodded. She made no effort to keep me. Signing her name on the divorce papers, she put down the pen and lit a cigarette. In the hazy smoke, her expression was particularly cold. She smiled, a chilly smile. "Noah, don't regret it." Her tone was confident, certain that I would come back and beg for her to take me back, just like in all our previous fights. No matter how fiercely we argued, I was always the one to make amends. But she didn't expect that I would die, that I would never bow to her again. "You're overthinking it. I didn't come to see Noah because I still have feelings for him. I just want to warn him. Next Saturday is my wedding day, and he'd better not cause any trouble. Otherwise—" Emma didn't finish her sentence. Her sharp eyes narrowed dangerously. Her tone carried a hint of warning. Her words pulled me out of that memory. The young girl scoffed. "Emma, you're giving yourself too much credit. Who do you think you are? What makes you think Noah would still be pining for you, waiting for you?" Rest assured, Noah moved on from that awful relationship a long time ago. He started a new life with me. The young girl picked up the photo, her fingers brushing over my face. Her eyes softened. "See? He's so happy with me," the young girl said coldly, looking at Emma. "You're just trash. Stop disturbing Noah's life. He stopped loving you long ago. He hates seeing you." Got it. Emma was proud and arrogant. The young girl's words kept provoking her. Emma stared coldly at her, the veins on her forehead standing out. When her gaze fell on the photo of me and the young girl, she turned her head away, her eyes full of disgust. "Finally, shut up." Emma grabbed the young girl's collar, her eyes burning with anger. The young girl restrained her smile, slowly prying Emma's hand away. "Is this the extent of Madame Shin's tolerance? When you were being ambiguous with David, did Noah ever go after him? No? Right. Emma's brow furrowed tightly, her patience running thin. I was just friends with David back then. It was Noah who was narrow-minded and overthinking things. Oh, really? The young girl smiled maliciously. Well, there's no need to overthink this. I'm Noah's girlfriend. It was rare to see Emma lose control like this. She was always the one who pushed me into becoming someone obsessed with love. But I knew in my heart, Emma didn't love me. Her anger now was just a show of her possessiveness. Emma was confident and arrogant. She was sure that I was hopelessly in love with her, that even after leaving her, I would still be pining for her and never start a new relationship. To her, I wasn't a lover. I was her possession. She never imagined that one day, not only would I move on, but I would also be with someone else. To her, that was a betrayal. As I expected, Emma quickly calmed down. She even had the presence of mind to lower her eyes and smooth out her wrinkled sleeve. She became aloof again. Noah and I are divorced. Whoever he's with is his choice, and it has nothing to do with me. I'm not here to argue with you today either. Have Noah come out and see me. As long as he promises not to attend my wedding, I won't bother him again. Her tone was very calm. In her words, it was like I was a complete stranger to her. The young girl restrained her smile, her tone indifferent. You can't see Noah anymore. He's dead. Unexpectedly, upon hearing the news of my death, Emma actually laughed. You said he's dead. The young girl raised an eyebrow. Her gaze toward Emma was full of hostility. You think that's funny? Emma walked into the dining room where a freshly made pot of soup sat on the table, still steaming. You say he's dead. Then who made this? He's good at making soup, and this one clearly has his touch. Are you trying to make a fool out of me? Do you think this is amusing? Emma stared coldly at the soup. Whatever she was thinking about darkened her expression. After a long time, she said, Noah loved cooking for me. There was a time when he suddenly stopped cooking, claiming he didn't like it anymore. But now he's happily making soup for you. She scrutinized the young girl, speaking each word with emphasis. You two must have been fooling around back then. Her gaze at the young girl was full of malice, as if the girl and I were adulterers. I was furious, giving Emma 2 slaps in the air. As if the girl and I were adulterers. I was furious, giving Emma 2 slaps in the air. I loved Emma for 7 years, with all my heart. In the end, she doubted me, accusing me of cheating on her. It made all my devotion seem like a joke. How ridiculous. Clearly, the one who had been emotionally entangled with someone else during our marriage was Emma. Not only did she not reflect on her own actions, but how did she have the right to doubt or accuse me? Did she not know why I stopped cooking for her? I loved experimenting with different recipes, especially enjoying the happiness on my loved ones' faces when they tasted my cooking. Emma loved my cooking. Once, she casually complained that the food her secretary ordered wasn't as good as mine. I took it to heart. I happened to be on vacation then. So every day, I went to the market early to buy the freshest ingredients, made 3 dishes and a soup, and delivered it to Emma at noon. Then one day, Emma told me not to bring her lunch to the office anymore. She said I was working hard enough cooking every day and that the driver could handle the deliveries. I thought she was being considerate of me. Until one day, the driver took a day off because his child was sick. I delivered the lunch again. When I entered the office, I saw David was there too. He smiled as he took the lunchbox from me. Noah, what delicious meal have you made for us this time? Braised prawns, sweet and sour ribs, stir-fried lettuce and oyster sauce, and spinach egg soup. All my favorites. Thank you, Noah. On the other side, Emma was still working on some documents. David skillfully set the table, playfully tossing a crumpled piece of paper at Emma. Workaholic, time to eat. Emma rubbed her tired forehead, smiling slightly at him. In a moment, when she saw me, her smile instantly faded. Noah, why are you here? My nails dug into my palms as I calmly replied, the driver is off today. Oh, if there's nothing else, you can leave. Her tone made me feel like I was a servant to be summoned and dismissed at her whim. After I left, I learned from her secretary that David had been working nearby and had been eating with Emma for some time. I did the math. The time David had been eating with Emma was exactly when she told me not to deliver lunch myself. I was nothing but a fool. I thought she was considerate of me, but in reality, she just didn't want me to intrude on her time with David. When I got home, I confronted her. I questioned her. "Emma, what do you take me for? David's cook. Whatever he wanted. You had me make it. I used to wonder why you suddenly wanted more seafood when you never liked it. Turns out it was for him. You asked me to make more food. I thought you wanted it. But in reality..." My voice choked, unable to continue. I had been so happy making meals for Emma, but after learning the truth, I felt nothing but disgust. But Emma, being Emma, always managed to stand on some moral high ground. She said David had stomach issues and loved my cooking, making one dish or two. What difference did it make? Why was I so upset? I asked her why she couldn't be honest from the start. Why hide it from me? She snapped, saying she knew I would overthink things just like today and make a scene. So she simply hadn't told me. In the end, it was still my fault she hid it for my own good. Thinking back on that marriage now just exhausts me. Besides endless arguments, doubts, and silent treatment, I gained nothing. A sudden slap broke my train of thought out of nowhere. The young girl slapped Emma across her beautiful, delicate face. Her action was so sudden that by the time Emma realized what had happened, she'd already taken several solid hits. Emma began to fight back. And soon the two were wrestling each other. For some reason, watching Emma get hurt, I felt nothing. I even wanted to applaud. But seeing the young girl get hurt made my heart ache. I didn't even know her name. When the two finally stopped, both their faces were bruised. Emma seemed to have taken the worst of it. The young girl only had a cut at the corner of her mouth, while Emma's eyes were swollen and her cheeks were scratched all over. The once elegant heiress now looked utterly disheveled. I laughed bitterly. "Serves you right." The young girl casually wiped the blood from her mouth, her voice cold. "Noah was unlucky to have met someone as awful as you," Emma retorted with equal disdain. "Noah's taste has worsened. Falling for a delinquent like you? He's a liar, and you're a thug, a perfect match." She continued, "When are you two getting married? I'll be sure to send a gift to congratulate you on your miserable union." The young girl glared at her, her body radiating hostility. "Don't you understand? He's dead. Then the soup. I made the soup myself." Emma still didn't believe it, but she knew that with the tension between them, she wouldn't get anything out of the girl. With a cold snort, Emma threw out a final remark. "Tell Noah that if he dares to disrupt my wedding, I won't show him any mercy." With that, she slammed the door and left. The young girl stared at the door, her eyes darkening as she forced a smile. "What if I decide to ruin your wedding instead?" Her gaze fell on the photo of us, her eyes softening. "Don't worry, Noah. Even if you're gone, I won't let her and David live happily. I'll make sure to give him an unforgettable wedding, too." She took another sip of the soup. As she drank, tears silently fell from her eyes. "It's terrible. Nothing like what you used to make." The young girl looked so sad. My heart ached deeply for her. Even though I couldn't remember her name, I had a feeling she was someone very important to me. I didn't want her to be sad. I reached out, wanting to smooth her frown and wipe away her tears, but an immense force pulled me back to Emma's side. I couldn't stray too far from Emma. I smiled bitterly. In life, we were a pair of ill-fated lovers. In death, why am I still bound to her? What kind of twisted fate is this? Emma returned home. David saw the bruises on her face and was distressed. "Emma, who did this to you?" "My cousin knows some people in the underground. Do you want me to have them teach that person a lesson?" Emma probably felt humiliated about being beaten by her ex-husband's girlfriend. She simply said she had fallen accidentally. "Really?" David was skeptical but didn't press further. Soon, the day of the wedding arrived. David always loved being the center of attention. For this wedding, he made it even grander. With elites from the upper echelon gathering, he even arranged for the wedding to be live-streamed. When viewers saw the luxury cars at the entrance, the dreamy banquet hall, and the beautiful imported flowers, they were full of envy. They commented, "Is this what a wealthy wedding looks like? Thank you, David, for letting us witness this. A perfect match. They look so good together, like they were made for each other. This is truly a fairy tale romance." I drifted above, bored, watching it all, until I saw someone familiar. The young girl, unlike her casual appearance the other day. She was dressed in an elegant gown, exuding a noble demeanor. She was beautiful, and it seemed her family background wasn't bad either. Throughout the event, people kept greeting her. She responded with a distant smile, clearly uninterested. I learned her name from others, Roxana. Roxana chose a secluded spot to sit, her expression indifferent. She seemed tired of everything. If she disliked it so much, why did she come to the wedding? Just as the thought crossed my mind, I suddenly remembered what Roxana had said while looking at our photo. "David gave you an unforgettable wedding. I'll make sure to give him one, too." What exactly was she planning? With romantic music played by the live band, the bride and groom entered. On the big screen at the center of the stage, photos of their journey together were displayed. The online live stream was flooded with comments like, "Perfect match," "Made for each other," and "Fairy tale love." At that moment, a strange smile appeared on Roxana's face. It seemed like the show she'd been waiting for was finally about to begin. Emma was also acting strangely. She had married the man she loved, yet she didn't look happy. She was smiling, but if you looked closely, the smile didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze kept darting toward the entrance, as if she was waiting for someone to arrive. In that instant, I had a ridiculous thought. Could she be waiting for me to crash her wedding? No, that couldn't be. I quickly dismissed the absurd idea. She was probably still worried, thinking I'd suddenly appear and ruin her and David's seemingly perfect wedding. I wanted to tell her not to worry. I wouldn't crash her wedding. I was dead. Even if I were alive, I wouldn't have anything to do with her anymore. When I love someone, I give my all. When I lose faith in someone, there's no turning back. On stage, David asked Emma, "Emma, do you take me to be your husband?" Emma, distracted, replied, "I do." David then took out the ring and slowly put it on her finger. The next second, the guests gasped in shock. David thought they were envious that he was marrying the eldest daughter of the Shin family, and his smile grew even more smug, until one of David's friends alerted him. "David, look at the screen behind you." David instinctively glanced back, nearly fainting. His smug composure vanished as he yelled, Turn it off now." On the big screen, explicit photos of David with another woman were being displayed. The photos were quite graphic, perhaps out of consideration for the many children present. The photos were pixelated. For the gossip-hungry, the photos even had dates marked on them. March 6th of this year, David was already engaged to Emma by then, wasn't he? Wow, David cheated. So Emma's been cheated on. David and Emma's childhood friends were just as shocked. They were David and Emma's #1 shippers. Back when Emma married me, they were unhappy and sarcastic. Now, seeing Emma and David together, they were overjoyed. The release of David's photos shattered their fantasies. They looked furious. "Shut up, all of you, shut up. I won't let you say that about David. He's a good man. There must be some misunderstanding." The guests, all respected figures, weren't going to humor them. They sneered. "A good man cheats on the eve of his wedding. Misunderstanding? What? Was David forced to cheat? Look at the photos. He's clearly enjoying it." "You all must be such great friends of Emma. David cheats on her, and you're still defending him." The reaction of the live stream audience was even more intense than that of the guests. Wow, the ship I just started supporting has sunk already. David must be regretting live streaming this wedding. The photos have already made it to trending topics. The whole world knows now. He tried to show off his love, but ended up a laughingstock. Emma is so pitiful. She carefully planned such a beautiful wedding, and David treats her like this. Pitiful, she deserves it. Didn't you know Emma had an ex-husband? When she married him, David played a prank, pretending he'd been in a car accident and forcing Emma to leave the wedding to see him. She abandoned her husband mid-wedding. Because of that, her ex-husband became the laughingstock of the guests. I heard Emma's ex-husband was forced away by her and David. So they're both terrible people. In a way, they really are well matched. David finally realized the wedding was still being live-streamed. He frantically ordered for the stream to be shut down, but it was too late. The enviable wedding of the century had turned into a joke of the century. After everything had happened, David took Emma's hand. "Emma, let me explain." Emma's face was stern as she brushed his hand away. "Enough. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" She grabbed the microphone from the officiant and said, "The wedding is canceled." Before quickly leaving the venue, David looked out at the guests, whose eyes were full of ridicule as they whispered among themselves, clearly not saying anything good. His expression turned ashen. Looking at him, I felt like I was seeing myself from years ago, abandoned by Emma in front of all our guests. I had become a joke back then, yet had to pretend nothing had happened. Trying to be a good host. Is this karma? David calmed down, his face darkening, his voice seething. It was Noah. This must have been Noah. Noah, how could you be so cruel? This was the most important day of my life. I've never been humiliated like this in my life. I'll never forgive you, Noah. In the crowd, Roxana watched it all coldly. Emma was calmer than I expected. She returned home. The windows still had the red double happiness decorations. The bridal room was still adorned festively. Emma calmly instructed the servants, "Take all of this down." The servants, having watched the wedding live stream, naturally knew what had happened. They kept their heads down, silent, afraid of getting on her bad side as they quickly took down all the wedding decorations. Only Mrs. Lee, who had watched Emma grow up, spoke up. Emma, I told you long ago. David wasn't someone who would settle down with you. Noah treated you so well back then. You shouldn't have separated from him." Emma's expression was indifferent. It wasn't me who wanted to separate from Noah. He was the one who asked for divorce. He didn't want me anymore. Don't speak up for him. He's just a liar. He chased me for so long, promised me forever. But after just 5 years of marriage, he gave up on me, not even long enough for the 7-year itch. All these years, he hasn't called me once, and now he's moved on with another girl. Her tone carried a lot of resentment toward me. Mrs. Lee countered, "Well, you broke his heart. When you were in that car accident, he took care of you day and night for 3 months. You ended up recovering well, but he lost 10 pounds. When he was sick, during your anniversary, on his birthday, all those times you should have been by his side, were you?" Emma reflexively argued, "I was busy spending time with David." Emma's voice turned hoarse. "I thought we had a long life ahead of us. Missing 1 or 2 important days wasn't a big deal. Besides, I explained repeatedly that David and I were just friends. It was Noah who was too petty, always making a fuss and picking fights." Mrs. Lee laughed in disbelief. "You make it sound so simple that you and David were just friends. But every time Noah needed you most, you abandoned him to be with David. Noah treated you like his wife, but did you treat him like your husband?" I still remember. Whenever you attended events, your date was always David, never your husband, Noah. Some people even thought David was your husband. Emma frowned. Noah didn't want to go. Did he really not want to go? Or was it because every time he went, your friends would bully and mock him when you weren't around? Over time, he just stopped wanting to go. Emma instinctively retorted, "They didn't mean any harm. They just liked teasing him. Teasing. The person being teased has to be willing. Noah didn't like their so-called jokes. If you truly respected him, you should have stopped them. Emma pressed her lips together. You don't understand. The favorites are always fearless. You relied on Noah's love and constantly hurt him. You never thought there'd come a day when he'd have enough, when he wouldn't want you anymore. Enough! Emma shouted, cutting Mrs. Lee off. My relationship with Noah is none of your business. If Noah still had feelings for me, he wouldn't have ruined my wedding today. She picked up her phone, confident. Believe me, if I call him to ask to reconcile, he'd agree in 3 seconds. Seeing Emma's confidence, I couldn't help but laugh. Emma really thought highly of herself, as if she were some great prize. Did she think I'd come running back with my tail wagging if she crooked her finger? I wasn't that pathetic. When I loved her, her love seemed precious. Now that I no longer loved her, she meant nothing to me. Too bad I was dead. If I were alive and she called, I'd definitely mock her. Emma, eager to prove I still loved her, quickly dialed my number, but it didn't go through. She then remembered that Roxana had blocked her number. She tried calling me through WeChat, but she was blocked there too. Emma was stunned, and it seemed she never imagined there would be a day when I truly didn't want her anymore. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lee continued pouring cold water on her hopes. Emma, Noah loved you too much and indulged you too much. You took it for granted that everything would go your way. Did you ever think that Noah didn't still love you, but rather resented you for leaving him at the altar for David, making him a laughingstock in front of everyone? Maybe that's why he ruined your wedding today, to let you and David experience being ridiculed by others. Emma's face darkened, and she cut Mrs. Lee off sternly. Enough. Just because you've worked in my family for a long time and I call you auntie doesn't mean you really are. If you say another word, pack your things and leave. At this moment, Emma was clutching her phone tightly, radiating hostility. She looked even angrier and more terrifying than when she'd found out David had cheated on her. Mrs. Lee sighed, shook her head, and left. Emma locked herself in her room, probably to calm down. Everything that had happened today had overturned her understanding, both David's betrayal and my indifference towards her. But someone was determined to disturb the facade of calm she was trying to maintain. Emma's friends called her one after another. The ridiculous part was that none of them called to comfort her. They were all calling to defend David. Emma, we've known David since we were kids. We know what kind of person he is better than anyone. He's a good man, and this must be a setup against him. Emma, you two have come such a long way together. You can't just give up on marrying David because of this. Emma, yes, David has hurt you in this situation. But this is the hardest time for him. Everyone is mocking him, watching him become a laughingstock. As the person David loves, you can't add to his troubles. Emma listened and responded with a mocking smile. She simply said, You all are really such good friends of mine. Before hanging up, Emma took a sip of beer, muttering to herself, They've known him for almost 20 years, and they still take his side so completely. If they treated Noah like this, I bet it was 1,000, 10,000 times worse. Noah, how did you put up with it? How did I put up with it? Of course, it was because I was blind back then and still loved Emma. I knew Emma and that group had been friends for years. I didn't want to make things awkward for her, so I avoided any direct confrontations and only mentioned things to Emma privately. I thought Emma would stand up for me, asking her friends to show me some respect. Instead, Emma merely reassured me, saying her friends were just a bit mean and had no ill intent, telling me not to take it to heart. Everything she said was an excuse for her friends. She had no intention of standing up for me. Logically, I should have argued back. Her friends made it clear they thought I was beneath David, that I'd only married Emma by some stroke of luck. How was that not malicious? But deep down, I knew if I pushed back, Emma wouldn't take my side. She'd accuse me of overthinking, of being petty, of not being able to take a joke. Over time, I stopped going to those gatherings. A while later, there was a knock at the door. Emma took a swig of cold beer. Leave me alone. The knocking continued. She threw her beer can at the door, white foam spraying everywhere. I said, Leave me alone? Are you deaf? The knocking quickly stopped. Emma opened another can of beer. She hadn't taken more than a couple of sips when she heard a key being inserted into the lock. Seconds later, the door opened. It was David. David was still wearing his expensive suit. However, his hair was a mess and he was missing one of his shoes, as if he'd run all the way there in just 2 short hours. He'd fallen from heaven to hell. Emma glanced at him, her gaze icy. "David, how do you still have the nerve to come here?" David stepped around the beer cans on the floor and approached Emma. "Emma, I'm sorry." Emma drank silently. Unlike before, when David would apologize and she would soften. No matter what awful thing David did, she would always forgive him. Seeing Emma ignore him, David completely panicked, his face growing paler. He tried explaining. "She was my ex. We broke up long ago. We ran into each other at a bar recently, had a bit too much to drink and weren't thinking clearly. That's the only reason I did something that hurt you. I swear, you're the only one in my heart. I never meant to betray you." Emma lifted her eyes, her voice calm. "Never meant to. Those photos clearly showed you stayed in contact with her after we got engaged." David faltered, a trace of resentment in his expression. "Emma, we've been together for over a year, and you've never let me touch you. I'm a man. I have needs. I truly only love you. I even told her that once we got married, I'd cut ties with her. Please forgive me this once, and let's move forward together." David tried to grab Emma's hand, but she pulled away. Her side profile was cold and unyielding. "Let's cancel the wedding. I will still proceed with the investment I promised your family, but let's part ways amicably." David's face froze. "Are you serious? What do you think?" The way Emma looked at David was full of disdain. David turned his head, unable to meet her eyes. After a while, he said, "Emma, you can't do this to me. If you leave me, I'll be the laughingstock of the world." Emma looked at him deeply and let out a derisive laugh, as if mocking David's selfishness. How could David not consider that if Emma overlooked his past mistakes and stayed with him, she would become a subject of scorn among high society? Emma pressed her lips together, refraining from mocking David for his self-centeredness. She simply said, "David, I don't enjoy being cheated on." David asked, "If it was Noah who got exposed for cheating during your marriage, would you also be this determined to divorce him?" David must have been furious to ask such a question. In Emma's heart, I meant nothing. If I had cheated on her, she probably would have been thrilled. Then she could openly be with David. "Noah wouldn't cheat on me." That was Emma's answer. David laughed. "Emma, don't think I don't know. Even after divorcing Noah, you've been waiting for him to come back, to reconcile with you. That's why you never let me touch you. Once I did, you and he would never have a chance again. Even when you knew Noah was with someone else. You still waited, didn't you? Otherwise, why were you glancing at the door so much during the wedding vows? You can forgive Noah, but you can't forgive me." Hearing David's words, I only felt it was absurd. How could Emma possibly like me? All she did was hurt me. Even 2 days before her wedding, she sent messages just to provoke me. She told me not to show up at her wedding and ruin it because it would make David unhappy. Her words were full of disdain for me and care for David. Yet, according to David, her messages were meant to provoke me into crashing the wedding. What kind of twisted logic was that? Seeing that message only made me feel disgusted. I'd already started a new life, but my ex was still obsessing over me, haunting me, thinking I still longed for her. Unexpectedly, Emma lowered her eyes, not denying anything. The beer can in her hand tightened slowly. White foam mixed with beer spilled out, wetting her hand. She always liked to keep clean, but now she didn't care about the mess. I couldn't see her expression clearly, but I knew she was furious, really, deeply furious. David kept talking, his words continuously provoking her. "Emma, can't you see reality? Noah doesn't want you anymore." "I'm not Noah. I'll always be by your side." "Emma, forget about what happened. We can—" Before David could finish, Emma slapped him. "David! Have I ever told you how annoying you can be?" David's eyes widened in shock. He never thought the always compliant Emma would do this to him. In the end, David stumbled away. Emma locked herself in her room for 3 days. She drank a lot. Her hair was a mess and she smelled a far cry from the dignified heiress she used to be. On the 4th day, she got up unusually early. She took a shower, put on a long dress, and became the familiar eldest daughter of the Shin family again. It seemed she had come to terms with some things, and her mood had improved. After enjoying a hearty breakfast, Emma left the house. She passed a flower shop and bought a large bouquet of roses, red as fire. Then Emma went to my old house. Emma knocked politely, and it was Roxana who opened the door. "Look who's here, the heiress who got cheated on," Roxana sneered. Her gaze fell on the roses in Emma's hand. "Did you remember how good your ex-husband was and come to beg for a reconciliation?" Emma remained calm, unprovoked by Roxana's words. She asked, "Is Noah home?" Roxana replied, "Noah is dead. The sky was dark, thunder rumbled, a heavy downpour was imminent just like before hearing the news of my death." Emma laughed again. "Do you think I'm an idiot? Why would I believe you? If he's dead, then how do you explain the chaos at my wedding yesterday?" Emma said. "He obviously still cares about me, otherwise." "Why would he ruin my wedding and stop me from marrying David?" She added confidently. "You're not his girlfriend. He just hired you to provoke me." Roxana laughed along with Emma's confident declaration. I didn't understand why Roxana was laughing, but the laughter made her very uncomfortable. She frowned at Roxana, then continued, "I want to see Noah. You won't be seeing Noah again." Emma was enraged by Roxana's response. She spoke with contempt. "Who do you think you are? Just because Noah asked you to play pretend, you think you're really his girlfriend and can make decisions for him. Noah is truly gone. He's been dead for nearly 2 years now. It was me who wrecked your wedding, not him." Roxana's voice was freezing cold. "What did you just say?" Emma was taken aback, her face tightening. Roxana spoke sharply. "I told her, Noah is dead. He's been gone for almost 2 years." Thunder boomed in the background. A heavy rain started pouring down. The hallway window was left wide open. The fierce wind messed up Emma's hair, and raindrops hit her face. She was as cold as ice and suddenly shivered. The fiery red roses toppled to the ground, petals scattered all around. They were such passionate flowers, but in a flash, they turned sorrowful. It felt like I was staring at my own destiny. Honestly, I'd already forgotten exactly how I died. All I could vaguely remember were my feelings during those final moments. After leaving Emma, I felt a freedom and happiness I'd never experienced before. I was hopeful about the future. Then my body was thrown high into the air, only to crash down and break apart completely. Emma grabbed Roxana by the collar, her whole demeanor oozing hostility. "You're lying to me, aren't you? How could someone as amazing as him be dead? He promised me he'd grow old with me." Roxana's long lashes cast shadows in the dim light. "But he really is dead." She looked up, speaking slowly with a venomous tone. "And you're wrong. Noah stopped loving you a long time ago. If he were still alive, I'd be the one growing old with him." Emma pressed her lips tightly and shoved Roxana away, storming into the house. She flung open every door, even the closets, muttering to herself, "Noah, come out. You messed up my wedding, so why won't you face me now? I don't blame you. I've always had feelings for you. I've been waiting for you to come back to me. I never thought you'd be this stubborn, not coming back at all. It's cool. You didn't come to me, so I'm coming to you. I'll apologize. I'll beg you to come back." "All right." In the empty house, only Emma's voice echoed. No response. She stared into the empty room, mumbling to herself. "How could you not be here? I get it, you must be hiding outside." She looked lost, like a completely different person. It's ironic. When I was with Emma, she was always distant and indifferent towards me. Back then, I wished just once Emma would worry about me. It would mean I mattered to her, and I'd be so happy after all those years. My devotion would finally be returned. Now, watching this unfold, I felt nothing but annoyance. Why didn't she do this sooner? She was the one who kept hurting me, who kept pushing me away. Who was she pretending to be all affectionate for now? I floated in front of her and made a face. Idiot. I'm right here, just messing around. As for Roxana, she stood there with her arms crossed, watching everything with a slight smirk on her lips, just like me. She had a mocking look on her face. Emma rushed back to Roxana. Tell me the truth. Where's Noah? I was just worried and let myself believe your lies. Noah is young and healthy. There's no way he's dead. He really is dead. Last year on June 12th, someone driving drunk killed him. There was even a news report about it on the local website. If you don't believe me, at least trust that news site. Roxana spoke convincingly. Emma pulled out her phone and saw the news report. It was a heavy blow. She stepped back. Then, with red eyes, she gritted her teeth and asked, how long was the person who killed Noah sentenced for? When do they get out? She looked ready to seek revenge for me. He wasn't sentenced. He's still out there, living carefree. How could that be? Roxana's face had a strange smile. You should ask yourself that. Emma's heart sank. Ask me, do you remember last June when David came to you saying his cousin Lucas had gotten drunk and messed up? He said they wanted a top lawyer, but the lawyer refused to help, so he turned to you because your family is close to that lawyer. Emma was sharp. She got it right away. Are you saying it was David's cousin who killed Noah? Thanks to your help, Lucas only had to pay some compensation. He's still out there living carefree. Roxana's eyes turned red as she spoke and slapped Emma across the face. But Noah is dead. Emma didn't dodge. It was like her soul had been sucked out, leaving an empty shell. Roxana looked at her and suddenly felt it was all meaningless. She sat down on the sofa, sneering. Who are you putting on this affectionate act for now? Why didn't you do it sooner? I agreed. Exactly. Why didn't she do it sooner? I've been dead for almost 2 years. In these 2 years, her business thrived, and her love life didn't miss a beat. She dated David, fell in love, got engaged. If it weren't for Roxana stepping in, she'd have walked down the aisle with David and lived happily ever after. During all this, she never asked about me. If she had even a little bit of feeling for me, if she'd inquired about me a bit, she'd have known I was already dead. Is death some kind of love potion? Why is it that as soon as I died, she suddenly got all infatuated with me? How ridiculous. All those years we were married, I couldn't warm Emma's heart, but now that I'm dead, she's suddenly this devoted lover. It makes everything I did seem like a joke. I won't let them get away with this. Emma clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. The metallic smell of blood filled the air. She staggered away. Roxana watched her leave and then gently wiped the photo of us. Noah, everyone who hurt you will be punished. Will that make you happy? I reached out, wanting to smooth the crease in her brow. I'm not happy. Not at all. More than revenge. I want Roxana to forget me and move on, even though I don't remember her anymore. Seeing her in pain still hurts my heart, but she never forgot me. How much pain must she be in? She lives in the past. Her future is nothing but revenge for me. Roxana is like someone about to drown in a lake. She drags down everyone who hurt me, one by one. But what happens after she drags them all in? Will she climb out and start a new life? Or will she let herself sink? I whispered, I'm sorry, to Roxana. She did so much for me, yet I can't even remember the role she played in my life. I opened my arms, wanting to hug her, but before I could touch her shoulder, a force pulled me back to Emma's side. And so, I watched as she took revenge for me. Emma could be incredibly kind to someone, but when she turned her back on you, it was terrifying. The David family business was a joint venture founded by David's father and his brothers. The Chu family had been struggling in recent years, constantly losing money. Desperate, they decided to transform their business and started a new project, investing almost all their funds and even persuading Emma to invest. Halfway through the project, Emma pulled her investment out. With the funding cut, the project stalled, and the Chu family was on the brink of bankruptcy. Emma then fueled the fire. With her influence, it was only a matter of time before the Chu family went under. David sought Emma out to beg for mercy, but he couldn't even get a meeting with her. Nor could he contact her. The Emma who had always been there for him suddenly pulled back, becoming unreachable, which terrified him. David then went to Emma's friends, hoping they'd mediate. But even they said they couldn't help. Many were barely holding it together themselves. Emma acted like a mad woman, targeting not only David for betraying her, but also going after those friends who had spoken on his behalf. The Shin family was powerful, and although her friends' families were wealthy and owned companies, they couldn't stand up to her. Emma's relentless attacks, ignoring any financial loss, left her friends unable to cope. They apologized to Emma, but she only said, "It's too late, and I'm not the one you should be apologizing to." Those former friends who had once stood up for David began to resent him. "You betrayed Emma, and we said a few kind words for you, and now we're suffering because of it. I think it's best if we cut ties. Let's all just move on. Take care of yourself." With that, they hung up. When David tried calling again, the line was dead. Once adored by everyone, David suddenly became someone everyone despised. I wonder if, in his current situation, David ever thought of me. After his return, with his manipulations, I faced a similar situation. Fate is truly strange and unpredictable. David eventually found Emma in one of the upscale restaurants she frequented. He barged into the private room. "Emma, you promised to invest in my family business." "Oh, I changed my mind." Emma's tone was light, indifferent. "How could you turn into this person? You said we'd part on good terms?" David couldn't believe it, then quickly added, "It's Noah, isn't it? You got back together with him, and now you're taking his side against me and your friends." Emma had been cutting her steak methodically. When she heard him mention me, her hand slipped, and the sharp knife scraped against the plate, making a jarring sound. She lowered her head, shadows under her eyes. "You still dare mention Noah?" David froze, anger bubbling up inside him. "What kind of spell did Noah cast on you that I can't even say his name? Who is he? Anyway, he's just some ordinary guy. If he hadn't married you, I wouldn't have even looked at him, let alone called him brother-in-law. And now I can't even—" The sharp knife flew across David's face, leaving a shallow cut. His trembling hand touched his cheek. Blood, his eyes widened. "Emma, you dare hurt me? Are you out of your mind? I warned you, you're not worthy of mentioning Noah. Why can't you just listen?" Emma's lips curled, but her eyes were icy, devoid of any joy. She stood up, slowly walking toward David. David glared. "What are you trying to do?" Emma bent down, picking up the knife that had fallen to the ground. The cold blade grazed David's face as Emma spoke, her eyes dark. Such a beautiful face. "Do you know? When Noah died, his entire face was mangled, unrecognizable. Even the best mortician couldn't restore him. He used to be so handsome." Her expression grew even darker. After returning, Emma had investigated the cause of my death. Late at night, I had felt unwell and went to the pharmacy to get some medicine. Lucas, driving drunk, hit me, leaving me bloodied and broken. He fled the scene. I lay on that cold road all night. It rained heavily that night. My wounds were soaked and swollen, and early morning passers-by were startled at the sight. Emma had cried uncontrollably while looking at those records, repeatedly saying, "I'm sorry." The overwhelming hatred consumed her, driving her vengeful actions. Wild, reckless. "What did you say?" "Noah is dead." David was stunned by her words. "You didn't know. The one who killed him was your precious cousin Lucas. Him? No way, he's a mess. But he'd never kill anyone." David's eyes widened in sudden realization. 2 years ago, the person he hit was. David had always looked down on his cousin. Drinking, gambling, all sorts of vices. When Lucas hit someone, he came to David, hoping he could get Zhang, the lawyer connected to the Shen family, to help defend him. David hadn't bothered with the details and casually mentioned it to Emma. Through Emma's connections, Zhang agreed to represent his cousin. In the end, Lucas only paid a hefty fine and didn't serve time. After that, David paid no more attention to it. He had no idea the person his cousin had killed was Noah. The demonic voice echoed in David's ears. "David, how could I ever forgive you?" Emma slipped the knife into David's pocket. Through the thin fabric, the cold blade sent shivers down his spine. Emma left. David's face turned ashen. Before leaving, she left a message. She said, "David, this is just the beginning." The Chu family soon went bankrupt, leaving them with a mountain of debt. The once glorious Chu family suddenly became pariahs, hiding wherever they could. Lucas had always been spoiled by the Chu family, and his crimes went far beyond drunk driving and killing someone. The Chu family had paid to cover up his misdeeds, and that's how he avoided legal repercussions for so long. After Emma gathered evidence of Lucas's crimes, she reported him to the authorities. Unfortunately, Lucas caught wind of it and went into hiding before the police could find him. Emma's friends' companies also suffered significant losses. In high society, most families don't have just one child. To persuade Emma to show mercy, the parents of her former friends all stated they wouldn't allow their children to inherit the family business. Only then did Emma relent. Those second-generation heirs who had once been full of bravado were now without their inheritance. They drowned their sorrows in alcohol, becoming subjects of mockery themselves. After all this, Emma sought out Roxana once again. Where was Noah buried? Roxana gave her a cold look. "Emma, do you think that doing all this will make Noah forgive you? That you'll be able to face him with a clear conscience?" Emma's expression faltered as Roxana's words struck a nerve. She turned her head away. "I just want to say, I'm sorry. There's no need. He's already dead. What good will saying I'm sorry do now?" No matter how harsh Roxana's words were, Emma remained polite. "I know that. In your eyes, I treated Noah terribly. But I really did love him," Emma said, her voice dry. "I just didn't know how to love him." Emma's parents had once been a couple others envied. They were childhood sweethearts who grew up together and naturally ended up together. In her memory, her father loved her mother deeply. But one day, out of the blue, her father grew tired of the relationship. He yearned for passion and fell in love with another woman. No matter that the woman treated love like a game, always keeping her distance, Emma's father was content to chase after her. He told Emma's mother that this was true love, so tormenting, yet so alluring. For Emma's mother, it was nothing but agony. She, who had never smoked, began chain-smoking, staying up all night, begging her husband not to leave her. But he was determined to be with his new lover and treated Emma's mother with cold indifference, blaming her for standing in the way of his happiness. Only when the other woman heard him and he came back seeking comfort would he treat Emma's mother kindly. The moment that woman showed interest again, he would ignore his wife's pleas and rush back to her side. It was a twisted relationship. Emma's childhood was filled with a false sense of warmth and endless arguments. In the end, her mother couldn't take it anymore. She killed Emma's father and his lover right in front of her. She told Emma, "Never love someone unconditionally. Emma, never love someone unconditionally. Emma, you'll only get hurt. The one who is loved without restraint will squander your love without a second thought and will never cherish you. If you want to stay with someone forever, you must love them in moderation." Then her mother jumped out of the window before Emma's eyes. The once kind and gentle mother now had a twisted, monstrous face. Her brain was splattered everywhere, her limbs bent in unnatural ways. Her mother's words became a curse haunting Emma. Having lost both parents, Emma felt incredibly lonely and longed for friends. She treated her friends exceedingly well, buying them whatever they wanted. One day, she was in the restroom when she overheard her friends talking. I'm so sick of Emma. She's like a clingy shadow, always following us around. We're going to the amusement park tomorrow. Let's not tell her. Agreed. Emma was stunned. Just one class earlier, during PE, they had smiled and taken drinks she had bought them, saying, "Emma, you're our best friend. We'll always be together." Emma's attitude toward them grew cold, and she stopped making an effort for them. Those friends who had planned to alienate her ended up coming back, being extra friendly. Whenever she bought them something, they would be grateful beyond words. They would put their arms around her shoulders, repeating, "Emma, you're our best friend. We'll always be together." But it wasn't like before, when she gave them everything they wanted. Their gratitude had been shallow. Back then. Emma thought to herself, "Mother, you were right. This wasn't the only time it happened." Emma was incredibly lonely. She would go out in any weather to feed the stray cat that wandered around her home. She thought the cat was just like her, pitiful, abandoned by the world, unloved. Whenever it saw her, it would run away, only coming back to eat her food after she left. One day, she finally managed to get close enough to touch its soft fur, only for the cat to scratch her. Emma was angry and ignored the cat for days. One morning, she heard a noise by the window. When she opened it, there was the stray cat, standing on the windowsill with a dead mouse under its paw. It meowed at her, rubbing against her hand as if trying to make amends. The cat used its little paw to push the dead mouse towards her, like an apology gift. Emma watched with a blank expression, thinking, "Mother, you were right again. Loving in moderation is the way to get what you want." Roxana smirked. "So you're saying you deliberately left Noah when he needed you the most?" Emma answered. "The more tender the moment, the more scared I got. My parents used to love each other so deeply, but then my father got tired of it and insisted on leaving my mother, turning to another woman. Sometimes, when Emma was falling asleep in my arms, she'd dream of her mother's twisted face, smiling grotesquely. Emma, remember my words. Never love anyone unconditionally. You'll only get hurt. If you want to keep him forever, you must be like the sun. You can't get too close. You need to make him chase you endlessly." Awakening in the middle of the night, Emma would stare at me for a long time. I held her, looking peaceful and content. It should have been a warm, comforting scene, but instead, she wondered, how long can I keep this up? Would I, if she ever responded to my love, start to feel that her love wasn't anything special after all? Would I tire of her, just like her father tired of her mother? And so, she chose to be like the sun, to make me always chase her. As for David, Emma felt no romantic love for him. He always showed up at the perfect moment, just when things between Emma and me were at their warmest, when she was most tempted to respond to my love. Closing her eyes, she thought of her mother's contorted corpse, the sneers of her old classmates, and the cat's merciless scratch. Her mother's voice echoed, "Emma, if you want to keep someone forever, love them in moderation." So she left, thinking as long as she loved in moderation, I would always chase her, and we could be together for a long time. Emma said I never expected him to get tired too. I never imagined Emma loved me. It was absurd, because she feared losing me. She chose to push me away again and again to make me chase her. In the end, it was selfish. To keep me, she turned a blind eye to my suffering. Roxana laughed at her words. "You're such an idiot. You think you're the sun. You're nothing but an iceberg." The closer he got, the more you hurt him. Roxana's eyes were cold. If Noah hadn't loved you so deeply, no ordinary person could have endured it for that long. You hurt him for 6 or 7 years, Emma. You disgust me. Roxana cursed Emma, then drove her out. Emma still didn't know where I was buried, so she had to send her people to investigate. Emma couldn't find my grave, but she did stumble upon the story of my relationship with Roxana. Roxana had a little-known blog where she casually recorded her life. Later, as I entered her life, I began appearing more frequently in her posts. Reading those blog entries, the memories I had lost started coming back to me bit by bit. Met some awful people, but also met a good-hearted fool, That was our first meeting. 6 years ago, I was traveling with Emma. She got a call from David and left, telling me to enjoy myself alone. Feeling down, I wandered into a bar and saw a group of men throw a girl out the entrance. The girl was bruised and battered. "If you come back to cause trouble, I'll beat you to death," one of the men threatened, shaking his fist. The girl got up from the ground. "I worked here for a month. You need to pay me my wages." The men laughed. "Looks like you haven't had enough of a beating." The girl's eyes filled with determination and tried to rush back into the bar, determined to get the wages she was owed. The men blocked her and started beating her again. She fought back, but she was no match for them. A crowd had gathered, some recording the scene on their phones, but no one stepped in to help. The girl was thrown out again, and once more she got up, trying to get what was rightfully hers. I stopped her. "Don't go back. You'll just get beaten again and you won't get anything." The girl looked at me coldly, her eyes filled with mockery. It was like she was saying, "It's easy for you to talk like you care about me, but my money is still gone. How much do they owe you? I'll give it to you." The stubborn girl was stunned. Then her voice was a bit stiff. "They owe me, not you. It has nothing to do with you." I could tell she had a lot of pride, but she was clearly in need of money. I said, "I happen to need a guide. Consider this payment for guiding me." Only then did she accept my money. Before leaving, she told me, "Roxana, that's my name." I continued reading Roxana's blog. Good-hearted fools are easy to trick. I just arrived in this city and got my money stolen. I had nothing. I worked for a month, and then they cheated me out of my pay. How could I know anything fun about this place? All the guides I used were from the internet. He even praised me for being an excellent guide. Honestly, I just wanted free meals. I hadn't eaten well since arriving in the city. The good-hearted fool is really very kind. He has a lovely smile, and there's a little dimple on his cheek. Seeing the good-hearted fool upset makes me feel upset too. What else is there to do in this city? I want to make him happy every day. He finally smiled. It was worth staying up all night researching, asking locals for interesting and fun spots. I smiled. So, Roxana insisted on being my guide just to get free meals at first. Back then, I had casually made up an excuse for her to take the money and not go back to that bar, only to get beaten again. I hadn't intended for her to actually guide me. I never expected that. The next morning, when I walked out of my hotel, she'd be waiting for me. Roxana wore a clean white t-shirt, her face free of blood, revealing a pretty face. Her gaze was still determined, like a little wolf. I was surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I'm your guide. If you're going out, of course, I have to follow," she said. She knew what I wanted to ask. "People who go to that bar usually stay at this hotel," I said. "No need." Roxana's face darkened. And she asked if I had never intended for her to be a guide. If the money I gave her was just charity. Seeing her pride, I feared she'd return the money and go back to the bar. So I denied it. And that's how she became my guide. I thought Roxana handled things very methodically back then, asking me if I preferred food or scenery on our trip, saying she'd made several plans overnight. It turned out those guides were all from the internet. With Emma gone, nothing interested me. I told Roxana to decide. So Roxana took me to many places. Every outing was like a blind box to me. Sometimes it was unexpected, sometimes delightful. Those were incredibly happy and carefree days. I didn't have to think about anything. I only needed to focus on having fun. She loved to play and knew how to have a good time. I tried things I'd never dared before, like bungee jumping. The feeling of falling was liberating. We also waited for a sunrise on an empty beach. When I woke up, I was leaning on Roxana's shoulder. The sun warmed my face, and empty beer cans were scattered around. We missed the sunrise, but I didn't feel regret. I vaguely remembered the night before, drinking a lot and yelling at the sea, venting my frustrations. Roxana called me crazy, and I forced her to shout with me. She looked annoyed, but did it, shouting even louder than me. I knew her life wasn't easy either. On our last day, Roxana took me to watch the sunset. We rode a small scooter, our white t-shirts billowing in the wind like two free birds. We were almost at the beach when Emma called. She said she was back, ready to continue our trip. I was happy and told Roxana to turn around and take me back to the hotel. Roxana's tone was sullen. "You have a wife?" I laughed. "Is that so strange?" "I'm old enough. She doesn't deserve you. You've never met her. How do you know she doesn't deserve me? She's wonderful. I pursued her back then because you're not happy. I hadn't expected her to be so perceptive." I smiled and said, "One day it will be better. Once I warmed Emma's heart, I'd be happy." But I realized later that leaving Emma was the true path to happiness and freedom. When Roxana and I parted, she secretly slipped a jade pendant into my pocket. The pendant was something Roxana and I had seen at a market. I liked it, but the vendor only accepted cash, and I hadn't brought enough. The next day, when we went back, the vendor was gone. I never expected her to buy it for me and secretly gift it to me. And I remember thinking that the pendant was about the same value as what I'd paid her to be my guide. This girl said in her blog that I was easily fooled, but she was the silliest one, accompanying me for so long. In the end, she used what she got from me to buy something for me. She worked for nothing. I kept reading the blog, boring, going back. Roxana had run away from home to come to this city. Her family situation was chaotic. Her parents had a business marriage but had their own true loves and children. They maintained a semblance of peace, each doing their own thing. One day, Roxana's parents started a divorce battle, neither wanting Roxana. In her rebellious phase, Roxana ran away from home. Her luck was bad. She got her money stolen as soon as she left the station. She was stubborn. She didn't go back but found a job at a bar that provided food and shelter. It was a lousy bar, and after a month of work, she got cheated out of her pay and beaten. After meeting me, her life wasn't so dire, and she finally had some real fun. Those days were also incredibly joyful for her. She went back not long after I left. Roxana's parents were irresponsible, but her grandparents on both sides adored her and took her in, grooming her as an heir. In the meantime, Roxana continued to record her life. 2 years later, I appeared in her blog again. I secretly went to see her. She wasn't doing well. Is his wife blind? If it were me, I'd treasure him. If only I'd met him a couple of years earlier. He's divorced. We met again. He's still so gentle. We went on a date. We kissed. My kissing skills are terrible. I wonder if he minded. I'm going abroad for a competition and have to train for a month. I hate leaving him. When I get back, I want to get engaged. That's where the blog ended. I did the math and realized I died during her training. When she came back, I'd been dead for over 2 weeks, cremated and gone. An immense sadness overwhelmed me. In a lonely corner, the girl had spent years carefully nurturing a love that finally bore fruit, just as she was eagerly planning our engagement. That fruit fell, rotting to the ground. She never even saw me one last time. All Roxana could do was spend a fortune buying my old house from my parents and burying my ashes in a place she'd chosen. She lived in the house we'd shared, cooking the dishes I'd cooked, endlessly reliving our time together. She was trapped in the past we had together. She should have had a bright future, but it was put on hold. Her heart was filled only with thoughts of revenge. Roxana, who was once full of life, now had her existence overshadowed by grief. Her only purpose became seeking justice for me. She dragged down everyone who had ever hurt me. I feared what would become of her once she had taken her revenge. Would she move on and live again? Or would she be consumed by her own sorrow? As I watched her, all I wanted was to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, that I wanted her to be happy and live freely, but I couldn't. I was bound to Emma. I felt a deep pang of regret and sadness, knowing I couldn't be with the one who truly loved me and whom I'd come to love back. Emma had read the blog too, and the color drained from her face. She looked devastated. It was as if reality had finally hit her. as if she finally understood what she had lost. Her body trembled, and she even coughed up blood. Tears filled her eyes. So I was the one who pushed Noah away from me step by step, until he found comfort with someone else. I never realized watching the one you love be happy with someone else could be so painful. She cried and laughed bitterly. Noah, I was wrong. I really was wrong. Roxana was right. I was such a fool, but it was too late. Her apology couldn't reach me now. I longed to return to Roxana's side, just to see her one more time, to thank her for everything. I didn't understand why fate had bound me to Emma when my heart now ached for Roxana. I longed to return to Roxana's side, just to see her one more time, to thank her for everything. I didn't understand why fate had bound me to Emma when my heart now ached for Roxana. I wanted nothing more than to break free from this twisted bond and find the one who truly mattered. But I was helpless, a mere shadow, unable to influence anything. The one who had loved me was hurting, and all I could do was watch. Emma's late realization of her feelings for me held no weight. She had hurt me too deeply, and her love had come far too late. It was all just a cruel twist of fate. Emma locked herself in the house again, drinking day and night. Eventually, she drank herself into a stomach hemorrhage and ended up in the hospital. Auntie Lee came to persuade her multiple times. If you keep this up, you're going to drink yourself to death, then so be it. Maybe I'll see Noah, Emma replied coldly. Auntie Lee shook her head and sighed. If you knew it would come to this, why did you do what you did back then? During this time, my father called Emma, daughter-in-law. Did you forget to send me money this month? I was surprised. How could Emma have any contact with my father? My relationship with my family was terrible. My mother passed away when I was very young, and my father remarried. The relationship with my family was awful. My mother died when I was very young, and my father remarried quickly, having my half-brother. His new wife disliked me, and my father treated me poorly as well. They were abusive, and all the household chores were my responsibility. When I got into high school, they demanded I drop out to work. I refused, relying on scholarships and part-time work to finish high school and go to college. After graduating, they tried to force me to give them 2/3 of my salary. And when I refused, they caused a scene at my workplace. Unable to take it any longer, I moved to a new city and changed all my contact information. I thought I'd escape them, but apparently that wasn't the case. My parasitic family had found out my address long ago. Emma had been secretly paying them off so they wouldn't come after me. I looked at Emma with complicated emotions, hurting me openly while helping me in secret. Why did she have to do this? Emma spoke to my father with an indifferent expression. Noah is dead. You'll never be able to bother him again. So tell me, is there still a reason for me to keep sending you money? What? Noah is dead. Stop pretending. I know everything. Lucas gave you $2 million and you chose to settle instead of seeking justice for Noah. Or rather, you never intended to seek justice for him. Your act of outrage was just to get more compensation. My father said sheepishly, we were heartbroken too, but we have to live, don't we? We raised him for so many years. It wasn't easy. A bit of compensation is only right, Emma sneered. Raised him for so many years, it wasn't easy. How dare you say that? You're nothing but bloodsuckers who drained him dry. Well, if you won't give it, forget it. My father muttered, realizing he wouldn't get anything from Emma, and hung up angrily. But Emma wasn't going to let it go that easily. She was ruthless in business, and dealing with my useless father and his family was even easier. She gathered herself, drank some porridge, and gave instructions to her people. Within days, my father's family called, demanding answers. It was you, wasn't it? All our money's gone and we're in debt, Emma replied coldly. If you were scammed, report it to the police. Why are you calling me? It was an investment scam. The police said investments carry risks, so they won't do anything. You knew, didn't you? How could you be so cruel? We don't even have a house now. Emma cut him off impatiently. This is what you deserve. How much money have you taken from me over the years? After Noah died, you sold his house and took a large compensation. But how did you treat him? You wouldn't even buy him a proper grave. You buried him on a little hill where anyone could walk over him. It was Roxana who found me later. She moved me elsewhere, and my family extorted a large sum from her for it. My father wanted to say more, but Emma had already hung up. With no more targets for her revenge, Emma went back to drinking herself into oblivion. She visibly wasted away, her eyes bloodshot, her frame skeletal, as if a gust of wind could blow her over. Auntie Lee saw her like this and started crying. "Child, are you trying to kill yourself? If Noah were still alive, he wouldn't want to see you like this. Noah is already dead." Emma muttered bitterly, taking another swig. "Even if he were alive, he wouldn't want me anymore. He fell in love with someone else." Days turned into weeks, and Emma grew thinner by the day. One night, she went out to buy more alcohol. Suddenly, a man jumped out of the bushes and grabbed her. David was with him. The man had a long scar on his face. It was none other than Lucas, who had been hiding out. Lucas was tired of living in hiding, and David was fed up with poverty. The two of them planned to kidnap Emma and demand a huge ransom. They hadn't anticipated that Emma had lost her will to live. When Emma saw the men who had killed me, rage filled her. She fought Lucas fiercely, even when he aimed the knife at her chest. The commotion alerted a security guard who managed to capture Lucas and David. That night, it poured, just like the night I died. Emma lay in a pool of blood, a smile of relief on her face. Everyone thought Emma wouldn't make it, including herself. But she survived, though her body was weaker than ever, and walking a few steps left her coughing. When she opened her eyes in the hospital, her expression was filled with pain. It was as if she was thinking, "Why am I still alive?" She was heavily depressed and had no will to live. Under Emma's influence, Lucas and David were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives in prison. Auntie Lee thought Emma had truly been through too much lately. She bought Emma a protective charm. As soon as the charm was hung around Emma's neck, I felt a powerful repelling force. The charm seemed to view me as something evil and was actively driving me away. I guess it made sense. I was a ghost. After all, though I had harmed no one, I was still an unwanted spirit. Thanks to that charm, I was finally free. I took one last look at Emma sitting by the window, then turned and left without hesitation, heading for the house I used to call home. I finally saw Roxana. My love. I embraced her, but my body passed right through hers. I was so happy that I forgot I was already dead, and she was the love I could no longer touch. A bit frustrated, I floated closer to her, my gaze tracing every inch of her face, carefully sketching her features. The girl who once radiated carefree joy now had only a deep, lingering melancholy. She was meant to be a bird, soaring freely in the sky, but my death had caged her in this small, square room, forever unable to leave. Roxana continued wiping the photo of the two of us. "Everyone who hurt you has been punished. Are you happy? If you are, could you send me a dream? I haven't dreamed of you for a long time. Aren't you afraid I'll forget you?" My eyes welled up. Forget me. Forget me so you can start a new life." But sadly, Roxana couldn't hear me. I deeply regretted the day I stopped her when she went to the bar to collect her debt and got beaten. My so-called good intentions ultimately only hurt her. Roxana had taken over the family business. Her daily routine was simple. Wake up, wipe our photo, and before going to work, say to my picture, "Honey, I'm going to work." After work, she never went out with friends. She would come home, force a smile, say to my photo, "Honey, I'm back," and then start cooking dinner. It was as if I were still alive. I once hoped that, as time passed, Roxana would forget me. After all, in this world, lovers turn against each other and betray each other all the time. I had been dead for 2 years. She should have moved on. But she hadn't. She placed her hope in the next life. She did charity work, donated to temples, and whenever she traveled for business, she visited well-known temples to pray. Once, when she was young, she'd accompanied me on a trip and we passed by a temple. She had watched me kneel in front of the Buddha, sincerely praying that the prayer beads would bless Emma and me with a long-lasting relationship. Roxana had laughed freely. "It's all nonsense. You actually believe this?" Yet, in the end, Roxana became the most devout believer. She did all this just to wish for an illusory next life. 2 years later, I was with Roxana at home watching the news. Emma's death was being widely reported. She had fallen from the third floor, still holding my photo. She died on a day of heavy snowfall. It was New Year's again, and the household servants had all gone on vacation. When they returned, one of them stumbled over her body buried in the snow, realizing she had been dead for 3 days. Once a powerful businesswoman, Emma died in a humiliating manner, far from the glory she had in life. The reporters all said she had drunkenly fallen from the third floor, but Roxana and I both knew she had committed suicide. She chose to die the same way her mother did, by jumping. Fate is cruel. As a child, Emma had witnessed her mother commit suicide right in front of her, a nightmare that haunted her for life. She believed that listening to her mother would prevent her from falling into the same trap. But in the end, it was her mother's words that pushed her down the same path. There was a sad inevitability to it all. The media was filled with praise for Emma's deep love for me. They said Emma was lovesick, that she had stared at my photo, drowning her sorrows in alcohol, leading to her fatal fall. Roxana switched channels, smirking slightly. What's the use of love that comes too late? Exactly. What's the use of love that comes too late? It was all too late. When I was alive, I hadn't received much love from Emma. After my death, all that Emma did for me felt like a one-person performance, numb and ridiculous. The days passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, many, many years had gone by. Roxana had transformed from the determined girl I knew to an elderly woman with gray hair. I thought that eventually, she would let go of her feelings for me, fall in love with someone else, and marry. But she didn't. She remained alone, working diligently, donating generously, and praying fervently. Years later, Roxana passed away. There was a relieved smile on her face, and in her hand was my photo. She seemed convinced that all the good deeds she had done, all her prayers, had reached the heavens, and that in the next life, we would meet again. I stayed beside her body. I thought, if people still have souls after death, then maybe we could meet again. But before her soul could even separate from her body, a powerful force pulled me back. I was helplessly dragged backward. I watched as Roxana grew further and further away. I sadly thought, is this fate? In life, Roxana hadn't seen me one last time. In death, she still couldn't see me. Roxana, you were right. Buddha and gods are indeed lies. Despite all your prayers and good deeds, we still couldn't meet, not in this life, nor the next. In the next instant, I found myself in an incredibly warm place, surrounded by cozy warmth. It was so comfortable. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Some live, some die. In the maternity ward, 2 babies were born. Their cries were especially loud. The 2 mothers were longtime friends who had promised each other that their children would be betrothed. Shortly after giving birth, they began calling each other. I had a daughter. What about you? I had a son at 1 in the morning. Perfect. They can be a pair. I wonder if kids these days will accept arranged marriages. We're such good friends. They'll definitely get along too. And they were born on the same day. I think they're meant to be.